Now, today we are joined by Ambassador of EU Delegation in Turkey, Ambassador Christian Berger. We are going to talk about EU civil society, EU-Turkey relations also in this pandemic era. At the same time, there was one important historical event, the 70 years of European Union after Schuman Declaration. Schuman Declaration was the first step taken towards the European Union. By that declaration, maybe a modest development realized at that time, a community of steel and coal. The vision was much more greater. The most quoted part of the declaration is its first sentence. World peace cannot be safeguarded without making of creative efforts proportionate to the dangers which threaten it. According to declaration, Europe will not make at once or according to a single plan. It will be built through concrete achievements which first create a de facto solidarity. In 2020, 70 years since the Schuman Declaration, we would like to discuss the development of this project and how to keep on making it better, how to deal with our differences and what do we have in common. Mr. Ambassador, could you give us inputs about this 70 years of EU development?
No, thank you very much. I think this is particularly just a few days after the 9th of May, this is an important question. And when we celebrate the 9th of May, this is a question that is always in our minds. Have we been successful? Have we achieved something that Schuman wanted in 1950? Let's look what he wanted to do. What was 1950? 1950 was 5 years after the Second World War. But not only after the Second World War. We had the First World War, we had the Holocaust, we had lots of crimes against humanity. And when you look back further, you had almost 1,000 years of wars between European nations and European peoples. So his point was that this is linked to the first sentence in the declaration. If you want to avoid this type of conflict, then you have to react in an equally forceful manner, in this case creating something that is peaceful. The European Union, or whatever stood at the beginning of that, is obviously a peace project. And when you look back the 70 years, among the members of the community and the European Union for 70 years, there hasn't been any conflict. Yes, there are still conflicts on the European continent, but there are, and there were conflicts also after the creation of the European community in the Balkans or Ukraine and Russia. So there are conflicts, of course, but the countries that are part of the European Union have seen an unprecedented period of 70 years of peace. And when you look at the generation that is alive today, you will see many of them had a very difficult past in the last decades. And when you add in the countries that joined in 2004 and the countries that joined in 2007 and 2008, these were also countries that had come out of the long period of communist regime and a very difficult period, and have now joined those countries that have had a long period of democratic development. So I think in that sense, what Schuman wanted, he was successful. And this notion of solidarity, that interestingly enough, is now coming back to the forefront because we're facing this crisis of coronavirus and COVID-19, is still very much the essence of what keeps the European Union together, responding in solidarity, and what he calls de facto solidarity, because de facto solidarity means you pool things, you pool resources, you pool institutions, you pool whatever you need to fight a certain crisis or threat that faces the member states of the European Union. But I think in that sense, his project, his idea is very much alive and very much successful. He also pointed out not only the importance of solidarity, but he also pointed out that this solidarity has to respect the diversity of our cultures and the diversity of our traditions. So he's trying to balance the differences within the European Union with the understanding and need to be in solidarity, obviously. We should not forget, particularly today, he also points to the reasons why this was necessary. He points to the very negative influence and aspects of nationalism that have plagued the European countries in the 19th century and in the first half of the 20th century. Meaning that this notion of nationalism leads to mistrust in a political sense, leads to protectionism in economic sense, and can even lead to hatred among peoples. So I think all these points we must not forget, and we always must revisit and come back to when we think about the 9th of May. Now, you asked the question, how do we deal with our differences and what do we have in common? When you mean the European Union in this sense, it's a good question. What do we have in common? I mean, we don't have one language. We have so many official languages. We don't have one type of food that we eat, or we don't enjoy one type of culture, although the European culture is generally recognized as something coherent. But what we have in common, it doesn't matter which country is there or is talking about this, what we have in common is very strong belief in the common space of rule of law. So in the entire European Union, the rule of law is one of the key elements of how we work and live together. Differences, you will never be able to reduce differences to zero. I come from a federal state, from a country that has been a federal state since 1918, and even before 1918, the states or the countries within the Austrian-Hungarian Empire almost formed a sort of a federal state. So you will not be able to completely get rid of, and we shouldn't, because we have to respect the differences, the cultural differences, the different backgrounds, the different history of people, different religion of people. I don't think differences is a weakness. As we say, the European Union is unity in diversity. We need to take from these differences, from this diversity, strength, because this makes us in the end stronger, because we come with different background, different experience, a different approach often to solving problems. And we see this the way the European Union operates. All our differences, all our issues are being discussed among the 27 member states with the European institutions in the Council, in Council meetings. And I think simply looking at that today, when there are issues that are discussed between European peoples and European nations, you do this in a meeting room, you do this in a debate, you do this in a discussion, and you come out with a compromise very often, but with a strong compromise because it is carried by the 27 member states. I think this makes us also stronger.
We are living in 2020 after 70 years of Schuman Declaration, but it is vision continuing and still very important. Also in the relations between EU and Turkey. Which are the main challenges that EU faces in Turkey working with civil society? We are as institution working in this area for a long time, and together with EU we developed several projects till now. What is your general observation? What EU faces in Turkey in the area of civil society, working with civil society?
Let me just make two introductory points here. First of all, the European Union very much believes in the contribution of civil society in our life, in the way decisions are being taken, in the way problems are being solved. We believe very much that people who are faced with problems, who are faced with daily issues, are also very often the people who have an answer to the problems and to the issues. So we very much encourage civil society to take part in any decision-making process, in any process that leads to solving a problem. And I'm not only talking about political and human rights issues, I mean the entire spectrum of civil society, from sports to culture to environment to human rights issues to whatever. When people come together and address an issue, can contribute to finding a solution to the problem. So therefore, worldwide, the European Union is and has been for a long time the biggest supporter for civil society. This goes hand in hand with the so-called solidarity principle that we have in the European Union, meaning that issues need to be solved or addressed first where they arise, And then if they cannot be solved there, then you move it up the different structures that we have in every country. So we are very strong believers in a positive contribution of civil society to problem solving and decision making. We also appreciate very much the very vibrant and strong civil society in Turkey. There are more than a million members of civil society organizations. There are more than 100,000 civil society organizations active in Turkey. Again, in the entire spectrum of what civil society organizations do. So we are very much interested to keep the space in which civil society can work as broad and strong as possible. We're very much interested in having a conducive regulatory framework, laws or regulations that deal with civil society and the way they're structured and operate as conducive, as flexible as possible. We also very much encourage the cooperation between civil society actors in Turkey with the administration, with the government, with the local administration. We were even running projects in bringing civil society organizations and local administration together and work together. This was done under the aegis of the Ministry of Interior, that the governors, the local structures engage with civil society in addressing problems and addressing solutions. And the fourth point, which is for us also very important, we encourage a close cooperation between Turkish civil society organizations and international European civil society organizations. They can learn from each other a lot. And we see this happening, and we welcome this, and we support this also with projects. So I think the main aspect, Turkey has gone through a difficult political period in 2016 with the attempted coup, after which we have seen some reduced space for civil society to act. And we hope that now that the state of emergency is long over, that civil society can regain this space that it had for a long time. And we can see civil society is very active, is contributing to problem solving, and we want to encourage this and we want to support this. We will continue working with the authorities, but also with the civil society organizations themselves to make this happen. And the European Commission, every year when it does its report on the accession process, is always focusing also very much and makes recommendations and suggestions to both civil society and to authorities how to strengthen this relationship to the benefit of the country. So I think the main point here is we need to continue working on this and making suggestions and proposals and make sure that this space that civil society enjoys is not shrinking, right on the contrary, is expanding again.
Now I am a little bit talk about pandemic coronavirus. Since early times of this year, it has been the first agenda subject all over the world, and no person in the world lived such a thing, experienced such a thing before in our generations. It was really a huge topic. What do you think about pandemic era in Turkey and Europe? There are several discussions going on, and we will look at these discussions all related to also solidarity principle, including solidarity principle. What do you think about them?
I think this pandemic is quite unprecedented, both in terms of scope, meaning it is covering the entire planet, and in terms of speed, it has gone around the planet, and also the impact it has on many of our systems and structures, in particular the health system. It also has shown one thing, that again, it goes back to what we discussed earlier under the Schuman Declaration, that solidarity, standing together, working together, is our best success and best chance of fighting such a crisis or such a pandemic. And we do this. So within the European Union, very quickly after the first sort of wave absorbed by the individual member states, absorbed by the individual legion cities that had to deal with the very high number of infections, very quickly as a union came together and proposed a number of actions. And here I come to Turkey in a second. Let me just say a few of these things where we also obviously need to cooperate with Turkey. One was very practical things to make sure that European citizens that were abroad and wanted to come back home had the opportunity. We worked here, for example, very closely with the Turkish airport authorities, with the Turkish Ministry of Transport, with Turkish Airlines to make sure that European citizens who wanted to go back after the commercial flights had been suspended to come back without problems. And we managed worldwide to bring back 550,000 people roughly. Then the next thing was to make sure that procurement of equipment, protective equipment, masks, ventilators, whatever you need to fight this crisis and strengthen the health system was also done on a global basis. And again, we had a very close cooperation, and we still have close engagement with Turkey, either from a company-to-company level, now that exports are again possible, but also in terms of Turkey contributing, making donations, and Italy and Spain and the United Kingdom and others received donations, and now also many countries in the Western Balkans have received donations, for which I think everybody is very, very grateful for this sign, very practical sign of solidarity. The next step, I think that we are, all of us, Turkey and the European Union, are facing now, and we need to also work together and closer together, is to get our economies back on their feet. Many companies have closed, many people are unemployed, or many people don't know what the future will bring. The European Council approved a number of steps, important steps in our view. First of all, the European Central Bank will buy up private and public securities. The European Investment Bank will support small and medium-sized enterprises. The European Commission will support a number of other sectors, including agriculture, transportation, airlines, etc. We also have enabled member states to exceed the budgetary limits that we have in the Maastricht criteria, so more money can be put on the table and put into the economy now, because now it is needed. And also state aid requirements were also eased, so the state can actively support now companies, as we have seen in the case of many airlines in Europe that at the moment have no income, cannot fly. So there are many, many aspects that we are dealing with now, and there are many that concern European Union and Turkey equally. Yesterday we had a very important and I think a very fruitful and useful discussion with the Minister of Trade. And this issue came up, how we can work together now between the European Union and Turkey to strengthen the economies. I mean, there's one consideration, as you can imagine, when the lockdown came in many countries, when many companies stopped producing and could no longer export either to Turkey or the European Union, the question immediately came up from a strategic point of view: can we afford it that some of these industries are no longer available, neither in Turkey nor in the European Union, so within the existing customs union? So the question is, how do we address this in the future? The efforts now by the European Commission and the European Union as a whole are now on being better prepared for something similar, in case something similar would happen again, to strengthen and to make more resilient various structures, important structures, crucial structures that we have, including the health systems, and also strengthen the economy. And here the President of the European Commission just yesterday again in the European Parliament reiterated the importance of implementing the Green Deal, the Green Plan that she is proposing, and at the same time also moving to a transformation to a more digital economy, which I think the experience that we have seen in the last 3 months are very positive, in the sense that we need to strengthen more the way we are working in a digital form and move this economy to a more digital economy. So many, many aspects where Turkey is also a close partner. Simply looking at the point I made about the health system, Turkey, I think, has shown to have a strong health system, a very robust health system. You have expanded in the last 10, 15 years the health system, and has coped well with the influx of people who were ill, or people who had to be treated, also in intensive care. So I think there are lessons also to be learned how to do this and how to be prepared also for the future in case something may happen again. So in one short sentence, I think what we have learned from this crisis is we have to stand together, work together to face something like that, and also learn from each other, because I think different countries in the European Union and in Turkey, we have done different things with different results. And I think we really should learn from each other what the positive results are, what the successes.
You turn back civil society and combine civil society organizations and this new extraordinary period of pandemic. What are your observations about civil society organizations' reaction to this extraordinary period, both in Europe and Turkey?
As I said before, where we see a very strong value of civil society organizations, these are groups of people who are dealing with daily problems and very real problems. And this can be, particularly during this crisis, you can have this, for example, in the social field. How can we make sure that certain groups of the population are not isolated? How can we make sure that schools are up running and running again? How can we help ourselves? How can we contribute that life continues and life picks up again? So I was taking part a few days ago. Actually, it was on the 9th of May. We were invited to an event about cultural operators, cultural civil societies, because one issue we all face today across the globe is that culture, artists, performing artists cannot do their job at the moment. So how can we make sure that their organizations or their livelihood can be guaranteed, so we will enjoy art and culture also after when the crisis is over. So there are many organizations in their very specific field who at the moment, both in Turkey and in the European Union, look into how can we soften the impact of this crisis. What proposals can we make to get out of this crisis as soon as possible? Once the health situation allows, how can we resume our lives as we used to have them before? Of course, there might be some restrictions that will continue on hygiene and on health measures, but by and large, I think many organizations are now working on ideas that will enable us as a society to come back and to enjoy the life as we used to have it before. And I think this is a very important contribution both in Europe and in Turkey from those organizations to be thinking about this and to make proposals.
I have the last question. It is related to future. What kind of actions should we take after this pandemic era in both Turkey and Europe in terms of especially civil society matters?
I think, first of all, we need to draw lessons from what we have gone through in the last 3-4 months. What has been successful, what has helped us, what has worked, but also what didn't work, and where can we make improvements. So again, suggestions from civil society organizations along those lines would be, in my view, extremely helpful and useful in the respective area of your engagement. So we also need to see at the level of the European Union itself and Turkey, how this cooperation, how this dialogue, this engagement can be used to this effect. I mean, I just give you the example of 2 weeks ago, the European Commission organized a pledging conference to look into the research to raise money to fund research into finding a vaccine. And this was a worldwide pledging conference. Turkey took part with a message from the president. Again, it shows we need to pool our resources. We need to come together, work together, focus on resolving a certain issue. And I think there are many bright people around the world and experts and scientists and technicians who can come together now and find an answer to all these problems. I think civil society here again plays a galvanizing role, an encouraging role, or can offer a platform where people can come together and work together. So I think the key lesson from this pandemic is, again, as the Commission is proposing, preparedness and strengthening our structures. So this is what we have to do now. Lessons learned, what has gone wrong, what has been successful that we should keep or even expand in order to make sure that in case we have, and you know, many experts are now talking about this, either a second wave or not an after wave or even another type of pandemic that may come in the future. So I think now really is the moment to think about all this and prepare ourselves.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I think this interview has also a historical importance. In the future, it will be good memory, I hope. And we will be in healthy, good, peaceful times. We will live all together in peace and under the values of human rights. Thank you very much for your contributions for this interview. See you in face-to-face meetings in the future.
I thank you for this opportunity. I think the questions you asked are very pertinent. Many people are thinking about this, and I hope we can also continue this dialogue and exchange views and ideas and lessons learned.